like to call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Or like a motion to approve the agenda for July 18th, 2024 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Claire, Wishkar. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Motion passes. The Board of Education welcomes comments from its community. A period of public comment is set aside at the beginning of each regular Board of Education meeting regarding public participation at board meetings. Those interested in speaking during patron comments are encouraged to visit the district website for more information. During patron comments, residents of the district and staff are invited to address the Board of Education on issues related to the school district. Speakers are called forward in the order of sign-up. Each speaker has 3 minutes to make their remarks. Please remember that only one speaker is allowed at the podium at a time, and combining time or giving your time to someone else is not permitted. The board appreciates you've taken the time to come this evening, and we value both your input and perspective. I'd like to remind everyone that we expect speakers will remain civil and respectful when giving remarks. If anyone fails to comply with board policies, regulations, and rules, we reserve the right to cut those 3 minutes short. First, we welcome Jamie Martin to step forward.
Good evening. I'm Jamie Martin. I'm a mom and a leader of the organization Francis Howell Forward. In February, I stood right here and shared my concern that culture wars and hot button topics, while important, are keeping our attention from some of the most important issues of all, like how we solve problems when we fundamentally disagree. Today, this topic feels even more relevant. History shows us that moral frontiers come and go. When motion pictures were new, clips of a Spanish dancer whose skirt showed her ankles, as well as the first to show kissing on camera, were both banned for obscenity. When we granted women the right to vote or the right to own property, many predicted it would be the downfall of the family. And when integration became law, families fearing interracial marriage cited Bible teachings to support their staunch and often violent opposition. Of course, race and gender dynamics continue to challenge us. Last summer, 5 of our current board members retired a non-binding resolution against racism and discrimination. Most of the directors never articulated what specific language in the resolution made them uncomfortable. And though Director Ponder promised then that a new resolution would be crafted, we've seen little evidence of that effort in the year since. Last month, 15 policy and regulation changes were suggested. The revisions removed the words rights or freedoms an astounding 9 times. One policy prohibits candidates and community members from discussing upcoming elections with parents on school property. Another uses the words obscene and vulgar to place heavier restrictions on classroom and school libraries. 2 common threads run through these revisions. First, a significant expanding of board authority, and second, decreased involvement of district professionals, students, and their families. In keeping with these themes, the Political Action Committee held a secret meeting on Tuesday, which they opened only to their supporters. I was disappointed not to be invited, and where 2 of our elected board members discussed the policy revisions. Today, I brought my youngest of 4 with me. He's back there. Miles promised to stay quiet if I told everybody he has his first loose tooth. When I look at our children, and I think of recent events, I can't help but wonder, how far are we willing to go to preserve the current standards of morality? And who, if not the parents, has the power to define those standards? I urge this board and our community to pause, to put down the arguments about policy, curriculum, and gender pronouns. Just tell me about your kid, and listen when others tell you about theirs, and believe them. Let's be a community that can hold deep convictions on either side of the aisle and still move forward, not backward, with respect for one another. Our kids, all kids, deserve that.
Next, we'll welcome Jeff Bargaleski.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bargelski, Lead Library Media Specialist. I'm here to address proposed policies and regulations 6310, 6241, and 6341. These policies, which pertain to the Learning Commons, were written and proposed by Vice President Cook without consultation of our district library media specialists, and newest revisions to these policies do not reflect our concerns. Last month, the board moved forward with a humbling discussion about these policies, during which the board demonstrated confusion over the process of policy writing and approval, of a timeline for next steps, and even confusion about the content of some policy. I expect a more robust conversation tonight, and so does our public. This all left me confused. Why did you vote to discuss these policies without Vice President Cook in attendance last month? And why were they even proposed? In 18 years in the district, I'm not aware of any data or rationale to propose such drastic changes to our policies. Please share your data with us tonight. I know our students and families represent a broad range of values. I honor that in the development of my book collection, and I honor that when parents contact me to place restrictions on their student accounts. I've received 3 such requests in the past 3 school years. One was to remove access to 2 books for one of our students, and the other 2 were simple limitations on the number of books students were allowed to borrow. So why do we need to overhaul policy and put into place artificial barriers that slow down the acquisition of materials for our students, like posting public lists of requested books? What special expertise do our district patrons possess about library collection development, literature, reading, or student learning that we don't already possess among our collaborative group of teachers and library media specialists? I know you want to protect our students, but why are we writing into policy confusing parameters about sex, language, violence, and drugs? They will result in censorship of materials that are perfectly appropriate in meeting our students' needs. Like books for young readers that delicately address sensitive topics such as child abuse or sex assault. Why do you ban these topics for elementary school where we have survivors sitting in our classrooms? Tell us more about the FCC definition of profanity and how you see that plays out as we apply it to book purchases. What kind of words would or would not be allowed in elementary school books? Try some out tonight, we're listening. I'm concerned that proposed policy reflects a narrow range of values, inconsistent with many of our district families. I'm concerned by the removal of language from current policy stating no parents have the right to determine reading material for students other than their own children. I'm concerned about board abuse of power. You propose to be the final arbitrators on collection development, so I would like to know your expertise when it comes to literature, reading, instruction, and most importantly, our students. Thank you.
Next, we'll welcome Grayson Justice.
Good evening. Do you think I should do what the teachers say? Then why am I here? I just kind of look down and wait until it's over. These are some of the quotes that a board member should not say about their school or teachers representing Francis Howell. But we have those 2 up here right now. It's a shame that my school district is getting negative publicity from the board, and some of y'all terms are ending next year. So if you're thinking of running for board again, don't. Because we have enough of these games and that are costing people's lives. These new policies and regulations that have been introduced from the last meeting without contacting or having a meeting with Francis Howell Education Association to go over these policies and regulations are unprofessional. Also, it's so unlawful and discrimination. I wouldn't be surprised if this came from Project 2025 or Agenda 74. If you don't know what that is, let me tell you. It's a 9,000 plus page document of every right-wing, MAGA, Moms for Liberty, Christian nationalist, Proud Boys dreams come true, depending on the November election. For example, eliminating the Department of Education, giving public school funds to private and religious schools, banning books, eliminating free lunch programs, reducing workplace safety regulations, ending protections and policies promoting gender equality, criminalizing LGBTQ+, especially trans and non-binary, and many more. Agenda 74 is the same thing, but it's in the you-know-who style in his first day of office. In short, it will end democracy and welcomes dictatorship and authoritarianism like Nazi Germany in World War I. You need to listen to your community, including the ones you disagree with, and make this school district a better place for everybody. Vote nay on policy and regulation 6310, 6241, and 6341. And another thing, happy anniversary for the board removing discrimination and racism. I think it's a good time to bring it back since you guys have no idea what you're going to replace it with. Thank you.
Next, we welcome Janie Wilkins.
Good evening. My name is Janie Wilkins, former teacher in Francis Howell, current parent. On Tuesday evening of this week, a far-right PAC that has organized to put lots of money into candidates for our school board that they support, get elected, held a private meeting. Only this extremist PAC's allies and donors could attend. Now, this wouldn't be a big deal, except that they also advised that 2 of our board members would be present to talk about the recent policy proposals. As a parent and a taxpayer in this district, I don't think I'm alone in having a problem with a meeting being held where I'm not allowed to attend or even listen to what the discussion is secret and it impacts my children's education. If you're going to run on transparency as a candidate, you shouldn't be participating in a meeting that doesn't allow all district stakeholders to be present. I hope that come this April, the parents in our district, parents who are largely not a part of this secretive far-right PAC, go out and vote yet again for pro-public school candidates. Thank you.
Next, we welcome Anita Keener.
Good evening. I'm Anita Keener, and I'm a retired teacher and patron of the Francis Howell School District. This week is the 1-year anniversary of the FHSD 5 eliminating the resolution in response to racism and discrimination. Director Ponder made a pledge to work with the community to create a statement, and yet we have heard nothing. I am concerned about the overreach of the Board of Education when it comes to writing new policies around library books and classroom resources. The policies that are already in place protect parents' rights regarding their child's education. After introducing Policy 6241, Challenged Instructional Materials, and Policy 6310, Learning Commons, at the last board meeting, Randy met with the librarians, then with the policy committee. Some things were changed to make this policy less invasive. However, Policy 6310 gives the president of the Board of Education all the power. Do we really think that is a good idea? It limits the number of educators on that committee and will not allow a librarian to have a seat on a review committee. Our teachers and librarians are professionals. Our librarians have expertise in this area and can speak to the use of these materials for pleasure reading and as well as curriculum needs. Also, this week, Francis Howell families and 2 Board of Education members had a secret meeting to discuss these policies. Randy and Jane, I thought you campaigned on transparency. Why a secret meeting to exclude a majority of voters? A majority because this last election tells us that what is important to parents is to have the educational professionals educate their students. If people thought the district was heading in the right direction, other people would have won in the April 2024 election. We need a board that meets the needs of our students and faculty. We need a board that student learning is the focus, not political agendas. Thank you.
Next, we welcome Harry Harris.
Right. So yet again, we have a lot of ground to cover in 3 minutes. First, While I know that some of these proposals that were introduced previously and have been walked back, removed, or given a different zip code or whatever has been done, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of order to any of this anymore. I can't even follow along with what everybody's doing. I've been told time and time again that from board members of how after an election, there's a type of will of the people that should be followed on the backs of those who won. Well, given this last election, I think the people of our district said loud and clear that they are tired of the political games being played with our children. Tired of lay people without a day of classroom experience trying to micromanage what our trained professionals, who you've heard from already, do on an hourly basis. And most of all, tired of attacking the children of our district, especially our LGBTQ families, and frankly all minorities, but we're going to swing back to that. I'm here tonight to say, stop it. Quit letting your political influences take you by the nose and attempt at ruining our district. Some of those original proposals I passed by lawyers that I know and just asked their opinion if they thought they were legal. To quote one of them, "That's a no from me, dog." As a district parent who was out there talking with other parents at conferences, just like former candidate Mrs. Kuhn was, we are exercising our right of freedom of speech. I mean, the PAC supporting 5 of the 7 of you all sued the district for the freedom of speech. If you try passing something anywhere close to what I saw when it came out, I can guarantee you that you will find the board right back in that position. Now, I'd be remiss to remind you, if I didn't remind you all, that this meeting is the 1-year anniversary of your removal of the resolution against racism and discrimination. People forget about that last part, discrimination, that it was a statement to ask that our district do better and be better. Clearly, that wasn't a priority for you. And speaking of priorities, I sat about 12 rows back that night at the end and listened to Director Ponder make a speech at the end of the meeting. Fitting that he's not here. Something about asking his elementary-age daughter if she thought we needed a document on the wall to accomplish this. Odd that he chose her advice over the almost unanimous lineup of people of color that night that came to speak in favor of keeping it. But then he took it a step further, vowing to work with community members to create a new version of the document. And those crickets you hear are still waiting on that document. For a year now, community members have reached out to him, including myself, in good faith to work on putting something together. I know some received a polite email that it was in the works, and others like myself didn't even get the courtesy of a response. You all can do better, and you need to. Thank you.
Next, we welcome Jarrett Pillsbury.
Good evening. Good evening, board. I want to talk about transparency. Saturday, as you've heard, will be the 1-year anniversary of this board's decision to rescind the resolution in response to racism and discrimination. The Francis Howell community was told Director Ponder would work with members of the community after the vote to put forth a new statement, yet that has not taken place, and we've received not even a community update as to the efforts and why a revision may or may not even be workable. More recently, a proposal was advanced to limit free speech at campus events. You've advanced a proposal to make finals worth 20%, a punitive step for students raising the finals to even higher stakes. We're learning about the board having final say over books, a preemptive book ban. We have librarians and teachers for a reason and for their expertise. Let's use that. What we've seen from this board, from this majority board, is overreach, little accountability, and most of all, a stunning lack of transparency. Sitting board members have blocked patrons from their social media pages where they discuss district business. Emails aren't even acknowledged, let alone answered. Perhaps of greatest insult and lack of transparency, as you've heard tonight, the Francis Howell Family's PAC held a meeting on Tuesday with special guests, Vice President Randy Cook and Treasurer Jane Pushkar. The invite to that event read in part, quote, "This invitation is for our supporters, volunteers, and donors only," end quote. And quote, "Very selectively share this with anyone you know is a supporter and might like to get more involved," end quote. I would ask for a readout of this meeting to be provided to the public. I ask you, board, how are you being accessible and transparent? How are you hearing from all stakeholders, taking time to listen and respond to them and their concerns? Because what I see is the board only interested in hearing from a select few and not serving one Howell? Thank you for your time.
Next, we welcome Natalie Poyster.
Hello, my name is Natalie Poyster. I'm a rising sophomore at Francis Howell High School. I'm here to talk about your new policy specifically regarding books. Policy 6241. It's frankly hypocritical. It states warning, quote, materials that present all viewpoints concerning international, national, and local problems and a rising issue of our time, end quote. But it does not allow books that don't fit, quote, community values and students' ability and maturity levels. To understand points of view, we can't let community values get in the way. This can censor and hinder the amount of issues and experiences that myself and my other peers can listen. Teachers that the district has hired have degrees on how to properly educate children. Let them do that and use their expertise without the bias and the hypocrisy of the community. Prophecy 6310. It frankly refuses to let librarians do their jobs. In 2024, a librarian needs to have a bachelor's in library science to be hired at a school, meaning they went to school to understand what books are appropriate for children of the levels that they are teaching at. They know how to accomplish your goals of broad, flexible arrays of sources, resources, and instructions to support students' mastery of essential academic learning requirements. You aren't letting them do what they need to do to properly do their jobs. And policy 6341, the definition of obscene. Your definitions are too vague. It allows complaints to be made about more books. In turn, it allows books about queer characters and characters of color to be taken off shelves. It contradicts your statement that I have previously mentioned of materials present all viewpoints concerning international, national, and local problems. It takes away stories and experiences that are given to students such as myself. Allowing these books to be taken off these shelves is irresponsible and not okay for anybody in our school district. Let the teachers who have gone through school and know how to teach kids age appropriately and responsibly to do their jobs without subjective community getting in the way. Overall, school is a place of learning. Learning includes learning others' experiences, which you all have agreed upon, as I have previously mentioned. Let teachers and librarians give students the resources to be able to properly teach their students. Thank you.
Next, we welcome Mark Kyman.
Good evening, everybody. I am not here to weigh in on the debate of whether or not pineapple goes on pizza. You can find that reference on the CISA.gov website. What I am here to weigh in on is, with all the policies that are being considered, the school district has not given 1 ounce of any regard to the fact that they've lost 1 day of school due to anomalous activity on the network, on the computer network. There is not a single policy governing information systems acquisition. All of the, I was here for the, when the budget for services was approved, and one of the services that was approved, I was able to get to the domain administrator login in less than 5 minutes while sitting in this room. I have not seen a single SOC 2 report. I have not seen any due diligence on the part of anyone keeping children safe online. There is no information security policy. There is no access control policy. There is no acceptable use of technology policy. My children this past school year at Francis Howell North were given access and told to view a video on a website that I, as a cybersecurity professional, blacklist, do not allow access from inside an organization by default. When I configure a firewall, one of the sites that my children were told to go to, I block and deny all access to by default. I'm not saying that the educators don't know what they're talking about, but there is no oversight to protect our children in how they go about doing it. I presented the president of the board with a security scorecard report for the school district. One of the biggest points reducing the district's security score was lack of a chief information security officer. We need managed services to take this role. I am happy to discuss this with anybody.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next, we welcome Sandy Hendricks.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Sandy Hendricks. I'm a taxpayer in the district, a parent of 2 students for Francis Howell, and a teacher of almost 30 years, 22 of those being here in the district. Thank you for your time this evening as I speak to the proposed learning commons policies and regulations. First, I would like to tell you why I became a librarian. One of my earliest memories was of my mother taking my brothers and I to the public library way before I was in school. My house was one where books were limitless. Books were magical to me. I was very lucky to grow up in a military community. My mother was from Germany, and my dad was an Army veteran of World War II and the Korean War. We lived next to the military base, and my life was full of multicultural experiences. My best friend's mom was Korean, and my parents' best friends were an interracial couple. So I learned from an early age to accept and love all people. My mom always told me what mattered most was what was on the inside of people, and that is how I've lived my life thus far. Growing up, my mother often told stories of Hitler and the Nazis coming into their schools and taking over, and her speaking out against it as a first grader and then getting into some severe trouble for it. But another life lesson she has taught me is that if you don't agree with something, you need to speak up, which is why I'm here tonight. These proposed policies will provide barriers to our students' literacy and love of reading. Our students deserve what we have been providing for them for decades, books that will meet their needs. My dad's parents were also German immigrants, and he couldn't speak English when he started school, so education and schools were very important to both of my parents, and literacy was the most important. Growing up, I loved my school, libraries, and librarians. There were no barriers to my school access, or my access to books. As a child, I suffered from debilitating anxiety, and books were my medicine. Books opened up windows to a world of endless possibilities for someone like me. Being in a military community, I was exposed to things like multiple cultures and races, so I absolutely loved seeing those characters in the books that I read. And when I did not understand how people could be so cruel, when, for instance, my high school basketball team couldn't stop in certain towns to eat at their McDonald's after a game, I would read about racism, and somehow it gave me comfort because it gave me knowledge. We can't be scared of things we do not know, which is why reading is so important. The policies that you are proposing will squash those opportunities for the students of Francis Howell. Children seek out books for many different reasons: to read for recreation, to learn, to seek refuge, to learn about other people's points of view, and the list could go on and on. Our job as librarians is to provide grade level appropriate, highly reviewed books on many subjects and in many genres to meet the needs of all of our students. Over the years, our students have changed. They are coming to us with severe traumas and broken family lives that just break my heart. It's the job of librarians to provide books for those students that could somehow make their lives maybe a little easier. Deleting the language, no parents or guardians have the right to determine reading, viewing, listening matter for students other than their own children out of the regulation. 6241 is very troublesome for me and should be for all of them.
Your time is up.
Next, we welcome Harper Schneider. Harper Schneider. Next, we welcome Sam Young.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for the chance to speak this evening. I want to talk about the library policies. I understand they're not up for vote tonight. But I just want to respond to some of the attacks that have happened on them. Some of them have been mentioned tonight. I've read through the policies, and I've seen the changes from the first reading to what was posted previously this week. To me, like, they don't restrict librarians from picking books. They also don't put board approval as the final determination of what books get picked. Having your list of books that we're spending public money on that are going to be available in our public school libraries, having that as an informational item, during an open board meeting, is a transparency item. It doesn't seem like extra work. That they already have a list of the books. They could choose what the format is, whether it's a purchase order or whatever. So, I mean, these things already exist. So just having it out there in the open, that's not board approval. It's just information. Some of the discussion tonight was that it would limit the types of books for people of color, LGBT, or people of different cultures. But the people of different tragic experiences, abuse, but you look at the restrictions. You're talking about restricting the types of sexual scenes that are put in there. You're talking about it's got to reach a certain point. So all these things can be discussed. It talks about drug use. Well, that doesn't limit buying books for different communities. It talks about violence, illegal activities. None of these things strictly limit buying books for other cultures. There are plenty of books out there that meet these standards and are available to kids. When you look at the American Library Association website, they're very clear that they consider having age-appropriate limits as censorship. They considering having age-appropriate limits as in restricting the freedom of people, and in this case, minors, to read. But I don't share that view. I mean, having age-appropriate limits on books just seems like common sense and very reasonable. Thank you for your time.
Next, we welcome FHEA.
Good evening, Chiefs, Board, staff, and patrons. I am Francine Hill, the new FHEA President. I'm honored to represent certified staff and educational support counselors and work collaboratively with administration and the board. Our staff is looking forward to welcoming back our students, colleagues, as well as all the new teachers. We appreciate the collaboration that has already occurred. The library media specialists were able to provide some feedback on policies, and even though all issues could not be resolved, some compromise was reached. We were disappointed that FHEA leadership was excluded from this meeting. The added language to policy 6310 about classroom libraries is also appreciated. During the policy committee meeting July 11th, the collaboration between board members Pushkar, Harmon, and Cook and the entire committee was a step in the right direction to working collaboratively. As we approach the beginning of a new year, some things are on the minds of our certified staff. Elementary and middle school teachers are wondering what they will use to replace BrainPop when our subscription runs out in December. Librarians are uncertain about how to proceed with their budgets to ensure district funds used for materials will not be accepted by the board and funds would be wasted. We have been able to make many improvements to our buildings in our district in addition to the new Francis Howell North because of the bond issue that was passed by the community. Tri-County Labor helped us pass this bond issue. However, the district decided to use general contractors that chose subcontractors that had not completed a federally approved apprentice program per the district's board policy. The district needs to support the people that support our district, as these union members are part of our Francis Howell community. It is hard to see picket lines at our schools. We also are very concerned about the proposed policies about learning resources because legal counsel has advised they may be a violation of First Amendment rights. The broad scope of the policies regarding the learning commons and instructional materials is setting our district up for potential lawsuits, especially when you consider that challenges to any resource will be decided by a committee which consolidates the power into the hands of the board president, who will essentially control 5 of the 9 votes. We believe that the policies will push parents to file formal complaints rather than working with building administrators or teachers to find alternative resources for their child when and if they even have concerns. We believe that these policies and regulations will limit the educational opportunity for our students and hamper our highly qualified educators in trying to develop lifelong readers. We urge you not to move forward with these changes. Again, FHEA looks forward to a new school year and a new start to collaborate for the good of our students and community. Thank you.
Next, we welcome FHSD.
Good evening, Vice President Cook, Superintendent Rumpus, Cabinet, Board, and guests. We hope everyone is having a great summer and taking time with their loved ones and families. I may have been in Disney with my kids this last board meeting. I was sad to miss, but the point is to recharge. School will be starting back up soon, so take some time if you can. August 10th, we're inviting all FHSD eligible employees to our before school bash at Chillax. Come chill out with your support staff friends for an afternoon of food, drinks, and fun for everyone. Just please RSVP by August 1st. We'd like to highlight all the work being done throughout all of our departments, our summer employees and year-round AAs that keep our buildings running so well. In our facilities department, our maintenance is busy at work with preparing the schools for kids' returns and handling all the leaks and floods this last week has brought. Grounds has been keeping our facilities beautiful all summer long. Warehouse has been tirelessly handling the huge move that took place at New North and are now working on surplus. The custodians, they have been doing top-tier tile maintenance throughout the buildings, restoring the tile from old buildings to as if new. We have projects being completed throughout the district, creating beautiful, updated, and safe schools for all kids in this district for many years to come. Have meaningful conversations, truly listen to understand, and work together to achieve great things. One Howell.
Or next, we have the consent agenda. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Director Cook, I'd like to remove the personnel report.
Okay, item C is removed for further consideration. So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item C, personnel report, for July 18th, 2024 as presented. Do I have a motion?
Do we need a vote to remove the personnel report?
We do not.
Oh, so can you restate that again?
Or I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item C, personnel report, for the July 18th, 2024 as presented.
So moved.
Shakar. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No. Could I make a roll call?
Yes.
Thank you.
Just so we're clear, this is a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of item C, personnel report.
Director Blair.
No.
Director Harmon. Aye. Vice President Cook.
Aye.
Treasurer Pushkar. Aye. Director Owens. No.
Motion passes. Next, we have the item pulled from consent. Board, do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion to pull, this is the part where I'm supposed to, right? I can, right?
You may amend the motion.
Okay, I'm in the motion to approve the personnel report with the exception of this, I believe it's called a stipend for Mr. Schott at Francis Howell Central.
Mr. Schott is listed twice. Is your intention to?
No, high school journalism.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the personnel report with the exception of Mr. Schott's stipend for high school journalism. Go ahead. Okay, do I have a second for that amendment? We have to have a second before any discussion.
Second.
Okay. Okay, so now we will vote on the motion.
Is just a question, is conversation about the reason allowed in this format or not?
It is not.
Okay.
Since it is personnel, discussion of it is not permitted. Next, we will vote on the motion.
I guess basically we can't discuss the reason, so we just have to vote on this version of the amendment.
The one for transparency?
Yeah, the one that you seconded is the motion that's in front of us.
So, board, we're considering a motion to amend the main motion. So the motion is to amend the main motion to approve the personnel report with the exception of Mr. Matt Schott for high school journalism.
Can we ask
do this one by?
What would be the follow-up to this, or what would be?
So initially, we will vote on whether we're going to amend the motion, and then we will vote on the motion of whether to approve the personnel report either with or without this exception.
So if we would vote no if we don't want to remove that one teacher from the personnel report.
That is
vote yes
correct.
if we do want
Correct.
to keep that person removed from it. So on this amendment, it's really, do we support a personnel report absent of this one teacher?
That is correct.
So an affirmative vote would be to
amend the main motion. All right, let's do this one by roll call.
Director Harmon.
No.
Vice President Cook.
No.
Treasurer Pushkar.
Aye.
Director Owens.
No.
Director Blair.
no.
Okay, motion fails. So now we're back to the main motion. So motion to approve. Motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So it's already moved, isn't already?
It's already
motion
first and
second.
second.
Yeah.
Vice President Cook.
Aye.
Treasurer Pushkar.
No.
Director Owens.
Aye.
Director Blair.
Aye.
Director Harmon.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have action items, individual. Up first, board, do I have a motion to approve the transportation fuel island schematic design and development as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Director Blair and Director Harmon. Mr. Stutzer.
Good evening, Board. So before you this evening, you have two schematic designs that will be presented by our new design partner, Hollis & Miller Architects. With us this evening, we have Mr. Justin Durham, who is a partner with the firm, and it's Megan Blair, Megan Barnes, I should say, who is a client leader for our account. The presentations this evening are part of the Transportation Fuel Island and the softball baseball complex at Francis Howell Central. As a reminder, the board during the March 2024 work session approved a listing of projects for district leadership to further explore and bring back individual recommendations for consideration. So with that, I will turn it over to Megan, and she will present the Transportation Fuel Island schematic design, and then Mr. Durham will present the Francis Howell Central softball baseball complex. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Setzer. Good evening, board, district leadership, and staff. We're excited to be here tonight to present one of the first bond projects that we've had the opportunity to partner with you on. Just wanted to take a quick second. Mr. Setzer just introduced us, but alongside Justin and myself, we also have two project lead architects that are working on these two projects that we're presenting tonight. Marissa is leading the Fuel Island and the Transportation Complex that we'll come back to you for next month. And then Grant Tomey is leading the baseball softball ball field improvements with Justin and myself as well. So just again, thank you guys for the opportunity to partner with you on these and the rest of the bond projects. We're really excited to get going and do some good work for the district. So with that, I'll dive right into it. So the first project we've started to work through is the Transportation Fuel Island at your current transportation complex. So the first thing we started to do when we were hired about a month ago was really dig in and start to assess the current site, understand some of the current challenges and also opportunities that we're seeing there. Some of the biggest things related specifically to the Fuel Island itself. As you can see in some of those photos here, when the district procured the site from the previous transportation company, the infrastructure is starting to age a bit. There's some deteriorating conditions, both in the paving, some of the access points to that. You guys have a large fleet of buses that you're maintaining and trying to safely get in and off that site, over 160 buses. So as you can see here, the current Fuel Island encompasses the underground fuel tank you can see in that bottom left photo. For the unleaded gasoline that fuels the majority of your buses and some of the district white fleet. We've also got two pumps there, and then you can see in that top left the fuel truck right now is how the majority of the buses are fueled on site. So that gets filled up, it drives around and fuels most of your buses. Some of them are still coming on one-off times, and then you can see some of the other miscellaneous things. This setup is a little bit dated to say. Typically, we want to see a little bit more protection, both for the buses, the other vehicles, and the staff that are utilizing them to make sure that they can do the fueling and operations on site very safely. And then you can also see some of the control systems. So obviously, some of the buses are unleaded gasoline. There's also a few of the buses that are currently diesel, as well as some of the white fleet. So we also need to be able to monitor and track from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, the difference in transportation budget versus maintenance and operations budgets. So as we look to update this site, that'll be something that'll be important to make sure that we have that infrastructure in place to do that, to maintain functional operations there. As you can see here, zooming out a little bit, one of the other projects you guys have asked us to take on is a new transportation maintenance facility on this same site. So trying to be very proactive, we've kind of zoomed out, as you can see up here on the current site, the old district office, that's now the transportation facilities there on the right side. Today we're going to focus on the Fuel Island, but next month we'll come back and talk about the big blue box up there, that's the new transportation center. But the key piece here is really because of the current underground fuel tank, we are going to look at locating the new Fuel Island in that same area to try and reduce costs and create some efficiency there and get the most bang for our buck. Okay. So zooming in a little bit, as Mr. Setzer mentioned, we are kind of in that schematic design, actually early DD phase, design development phase. Actually, since we've submitted this presentation, we've actually met with end users again. So we've had, I think, 4 meetings with end users, the transportation team, since they are the end users and really know that facility and how the operations work. So we've been digging into those details with them and making some minor tweaks to the design. But as you can see here, kind of the core pieces of this updated site would be looking at a new prefabricated canopy to provide some protection from the elements. No matter what the weather is, if they're out there fueling buses and getting things moving, bus drivers are coming and going. So we do want to provide that protection there. Currently, right now, there's the 2 fuel pumps. They only have 1 fast fill to fill that large fueling tank. And right now, they're having to climb on top of that fueler to fill it from the top. Not probably the most ideal situation. So we do want to look at getting a new fast fill station there with some safety and security ladders and access points to make sure we can do that again and throughout the elements very safely. As I mentioned, right now the majority of the vehicles are unleaded gas that are being fueled from that underground tank. Currently about 10 buses are diesel as well as some of the white fleet. So this is one of the things that's changed in the last couple of weeks. Initially, we were talking about a 500-gallon diesel tank that would be above ground. Since then, some of the new buses that were going to replace some of the aging buses are on order, and unfortunately, the only ones that can be fulfilled in the timely manner would be new diesel buses. So we are actually looking at upsizing that to 1,000 gallons in the next updated design or durations before we finalize this. And the other thing, just zooming back out as well, is we are also looking at knowing that fueling and different technologies with vehicles and buses continues to change. We're also looking to try and make sure we have an opportunity if diesel would increase in the number of buses and vehicles, that we also have space on site to potentially do a larger diesel tank underground or somewhere else long term. Just kind of thinking through that to set us up for success in the future. And then finally, also trying to provide a fueler kiosk under that canopy, so as they are kind of doing their monitoring and things like that, they can get out of the elements, especially in the winter and conditions, things like that. So finally, real quick, as you can see here, since we are in the schematic phase looking at a prefabricated canopy like the photo in the top left, that protected kiosk would be underneath that canopy, something like the top right. The above ground diesel tank will look like something like that bottom left. And then we're looking at the catwalk and platform that will help safely and securely fuel that tanker to get the buses fueled very efficiently there. Okay, so with that, right now, as I mentioned, we've got another meeting with end users here, I think in about a week and a half, to kind of continue to finalize some of those details. We've also been doing an assessment on site to ensure that the current conditions of that underground fuel tank are in good operational capacity, that nothing else needs to happen there. So as things continue to progress, we're going to continue working on some of those minor details, access control, security cameras, that sort of thing, finalize that design, and our hope is obviously incorporating any recommendations or modifications requested tonight, and then we would hope to come back in August with the final design recommendation to the board.
Board, any questions?
Just one question. The above ground tank, what are the ways to make sure it's safe? Is there like a lock to make sure it's not misused or poached in other ways?
So obviously the site itself is fully fenced and fully secure. There is secure access to the site itself. And then with the new fuel island, there'll be kind of concrete curbs and some bollards and things to protect that. And there are some ways that we can look at locking out access to it as well, controlled with badge access. So you've got to come in with a badge to turn it on, that sort of thing, and then just protecting the site in general.
Board, I'd just like to reiterate what Megan shared, the current safety concerns that without having the structure that they are climbing up on top to fuel in all of the elements, and it's a significant risk not only for the person doing that, potential spills and things that could happen. One of the reasons this is so important.
One question with respect to the in-ground tank. Well, I guess the ultimate question is, this is right next to a floodplain or very close. Have you looked at all that with bearing a big empty tank, be it buoyancy or whatever? And has any of those costs, I guess, would we be surprised by those costs? Or have you already looked at them and you've considered it, and in-ground is the best, most cost-effective way to go?
So currently we are actually going to be reusing the current underground tank. So we will not be bearing a new tank currently. And then the new diesel one would be above ground.
Okay.
We will be adding a little bit more impervious surface, so we are looking at that. There is a drainage detention basin just to the north of the site, so that will be taking on some more. So we are doing final analysis of that with the survey to make sure that we won't be impacting the site around that as well.
And the in-ground tank currently is in good condition?
Yes, so we are working with a fuel consultant that has done service over time. We are doing a little bit more due diligence on that in terms of there is a little bit of a question on the original age of when the previous owners put that in there. So that is something we are actually still looking on and have a consultant actually coming out later this week, tomorrow, it's Thursday, to review that one more time to make sure there's no concerns there.
Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the Francis Howell Central baseball/softball field conversion to turf, schematic design and development as presented.
So moved. Second.
Director Blair, Director Harmon, Mr. Stutzer again.
I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Durham. He's presenting this one.
All right, thank you guys very much for having us tonight. Like Megan said, we're excited to be here. I want to take a few minutes and give you guys an update on the ball field improvements at Francis Howell Central. And so we always start, just like Megan did, at the transportation facility is assessing our existing elements on the site. So what we're looking at here at Francis Howell Central is what we would call like the south field, not the back field. And what we looked at here is we have a baseball combo field. So right now it's set up for softball. You can see that temporary fence if you drive by now. It's kind of set up for that sport that we're going to play in the fall. So the facilities team has done a good job getting that set up. So we've looked at that. We've looked at the 2 dugouts that are currently on site. We have 1 metal storage building that we currently house our nets and our L screens and things like that in. We have 2 bullpens on the site. We have 1 on the third base side and 1 on the first base side. We have 2 batting cages. Those 2 batting cages are kind of down the right field line on the first base side. We have 5 sets of metal bleachers that currently exist. Some of them are aging a little bit. You'll see some of those pictures here in a few minutes. And then we have a fenced storage area kind of down by the batting cages on the right field side that we currently have some of those larger pieces like your Bubba tunnel and things like that they use for batting practice. So we've been out to the site, we've kind of taken an assessment of that, and one of the major objectives here, one of the only objectives that we have really is to get turf onto this field. And by doing that, what that means is, we put turf on the infield, the outfield. We would also do the batting cages and the bullpen, so it would kind of envelop all of those pieces, right? So you'd have a full turf field and facility within the confines of the field itself. Some of the good parts about this is by eliminating the grass, we do eliminate a lot of that ongoing maintenance, the mowing, the watering, the fertilization, the striping of those fields, putting the chalk down and things like that. And so what we estimate really is those expenditures are around $60,000 to $75,000 a year. Don't want to mislead, there is still work that needs to be done on a turf field. You still have to groom it, you still have to maintain it. There is work to be done, but it's not near the work that we would typically have to do on a natural turf field. So that's a good benefit there. One of the other benefits that we didn't really put up here is the ability to help instructional time. We play softball and baseball in the spring and the fall, a lot of wet seasons. So a lot of times when we do have games that are rained out, our students may have to leave a little bit early to go to another field or postpone games or put things off, which can increase travel time. So they may be released out of school earlier to travel to another field if we have to relocate. So sometimes it is nice to have those turf fields, not only for the maintenance piece, but also for not having a loss of instructional time if we have to travel to another site on a rainy day or a day after to play. So on our baseball, softball improvements, one of the things that we're looking at, and we always do when we do this, is a new perimeter fence. And the reason why we take the old fence down and put a new fence up is to anchor the new turf field. We have to have a concrete curb that runs around the perimeter. And that allows us to attach that turf to it and hold it tight in place. So when we do that, then we'll have to put a new fence up. And we'll work through that with you guys on what that look can be and the safety measures, like that safety cap rail that you see on the top there, just to protect players from the knuckles on the top of the fence and those kind of things. Another scope piece that we looked at here is the backstop replacement. So currently we have a very tall chain link backstop. It obscures the view of the patrons when they come to watch some of the games. So we are proposing to replace that with a net structure, kind of like you see down on the bottom of the picture here, down on the bottom left. So what that comprises of is a net structure and a pony wall or a knee wall that goes around the bottom with some padding on the inside. And so what that will allow us to do is give better views to the patrons, and it also helps to maintain the use of our equipment. So baseballs and things that hit it, they don't get as damaged. Also, when baseballs do hit that chain link fence, a lot of times if you guys have baseball players like I do, you will see that bottom kind of curl up. So the fencing around the bottom can be a bit of a maintenance issue too. We kind of eliminate a lot of that when we do this type of piece. So it will be a good addition for several different reasons to that facility. The dugouts themselves, currently the bottom, this is a representation of what we have, and on the bottom left you'll kind of see in the area in orange is the area that we're looking to enclose those dugouts. So currently people can walk right up and interact with players and things like that, whether it's another student or a parent. Don't always want that during a game, right? Kind of want those athletes to pay attention to their coaches, pay attention to their games. So we're looking at an opportunity to potentially block that in, or either block or middle panel another piece that would kind of separate those players so they can focus on their game and pay attention. Also, there's a little bit of aged and deteriorated wood and things like that around those dugouts that we would want to take care of. So just updating those, painting them, making them look good, that's kind of what we've got in our base bid scope. So as we walk through, you'll see artificial turf as number one. And then along with that, you'll see the bullpens, which is 1B. So you'll have one on the third base side, one on the first base side, so home and visitors. And then you have those batting cages, those would all be turf. Number two is a new perimeter fencing, so that would go all the way around the facility from basically dugout all the way around the outfield to the other dugout, where the new net backstop would then fully enclose that field. The next would be our renovation of the dugouts, so those are indicated by number 4 right there. And then what we wanted to do is just step back and do a full analysis of this site for you guys, right? So these are some future options that we can consider. When we did our presentation to you, to be your architect, we told you that we would help you with alternates and things like that to maximize what you guys can do on bid day. And so what we want to do is just bring to you guys some things that we typically see on baseball fields and just bring it to your consideration on whether you would like to do some of those things or not. So the first thing is additional needs and opportunities, as we've identified the potential of lights, right? It is an expensive move, but what it can do is allow us to use that field a little bit more. Instead of just 1 or 2 games on a day, we can extend that time period of use just beyond daylight hours during the spring when the sun goes down early in the afternoon or the evenings. So just extended use for those lights. Another one, this is a bit of a safety and security concern for us. So currently we had talked about the 5 sets of bleachers that are back behind the backstop. So we have asphalt that goes back there. Now you kind of drive down an access road and it's asphalt. Some of that slopes a little bit towards the field, which is not what we want. We typically want all those surfaces to drain away from our fields. So not only for irrigation and water purposes, we would want to kind of change that slope, but also for safety. Some of the bleachers are a little bit tipped and turned so that it's not as comfortable as it should be really to kind of set on some of those bleachers. So that might be a consideration of an optional thing that we do for you guys. The metal storage building that we talked about at the very beginning, there's better ways that we could potentially do that. And what we typically do, or what we typically see, is we can add some storage additions onto the dugouts that face the field. It just adds easier access to get those L screens, the screens, the balls, the things that they use on a daily basis on and off the field on a quicker manner. And then, so here's some of the additional options. Number 1 is the field lighting. So you'll see we typically have somewhere between 5 and 7 lights per field. It depends on kind of the layout, how high we can make the poles, etc. So you'll see those indicated as the number 1s. Number 2 would be the modifying of those bleachers in that asphalt pad that's behind what would be the net backstop. And then with that, we hope, just like Megan had mentioned on the transportation fuel island, we would like to come back in August and talk to you guys about the final design and then ask for permission to go out to bid on this. So we still have a few meetings with the end user groups just to make sure that we're getting the designs and all the intricacies done that we need. But we do have that we'll be back to you in August. And then for our next steps, in August, we'll be here to talk, like Megan said, transportation fuel island, the baseball softball improvements at Francis Howell Central, and then we will be here to talk to you about our conceptual and SD designs for the transportation facility itself. So that'll kind of be what we will bring to you in the month of August. So with that, I will turn it over to you guys for Q&A.
Any questions?
Just one question. The turf that's being used, I would imagine it's been taken into consideration its effect on the athletes.
Yes.
Can you just share what turf it is and how it's actually good for our student athletes?
Yeah.
Or
So we
students and
haven't.
athletes, yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't necessarily identified a specific brand of turf yet. We're actually working through that. There's several different things to consider on the type of turf that you purchase, whether that is something that we want to directly purchase or something that we want to put out to the open bid. Several different manufacturers, they all make a very similar type product. What we would like to do is work with you guys and your staff on the playability of those surfaces. So I've done probably 20 or 25 baseball fields in the last 4 or 5 years, and you can make these surfaces drastically different. So some can be a little bit softer, which means they have a little bit more bounce to the baseballs. They're a little bit more forgiving to the athlete a little bit, right? Because they do have that softer surface. You can also make them a little bit harder, a little bit faster, right? So ground balls run a little bit faster. Fly balls that hit the ground don't bounce as high, but they are a little bit tougher on the athlete. So those are some considerations that we'll bring forward to you guys, you know, when we talk to the coaches and the staff about what type of playability, what type of surface would you like. And it also has to do with the infill of the surface, right? So that's rubber and sand. Sometimes there's alternative ways that we could do infill. Coconut fibers and some other things. They all have their pros and cons, and those will be the things that we really look at and dig into in the next month before we come back to you. And we'll address those when we come back next month for sure, and I'll highlight those for you, for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question on the backstop, is there any way to look at flexibility, especially for softball use, making the backstop shorter distance?
Yeah, so there are recommended distances for baseball and softball. I mean, MSHA will kind of dictate what our minimum is. And so what we can do, that's the beauty of doing the turf, is we can kind of reorient that field. We can move home plate back a little bit because we're going to have to remove all those current bases anyway. So that'll be something that we can look at. So if something that you would like to see is maybe a shorter backstop versus a larger one that may be currently there, we can look at that distance and kind of offset that.
Just from having kids play the game, baseball, softball, totally different field layout.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the softball coach has had any input as to where he or she would like a backstop to be.
Yeah.
I would just like that to be flexible. And then batting cages. I could see the turf getting wore if you're hitting out of the same batting cage multiple.
Yeah.
How is that addressed? And even around home plate where
Yeah.
the catchers always sit and where the batter.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we set up our fields is that for home plate on your main playing field, your home plate and where the catcher sit and where the umpire stands, kind of that home plate area, those are removable panels. So when we buy the turf, you will get about an 8-year warranty on the full field, but those high wear areas, they're actually Velcroed down. So you will get 4 to 6 sets of those, and what we can do is every couple of years we can unvelcro those when they start to wear, and then put the new ones down. They also make items like mats that we can set down for practices and things like that, so that the boys and girls are hitting off of mats not only in the batting cage but at home plate on the field. Those mats are somewhat disposable, right? They're about $100 a piece. Those can be brought in, and we can specify that in the project so that they're kind of a use thing that keeps the use off of your turf, and you wear those wear items, not necessarily your permanent turf. So those are the things that we would do on those high wear areas, yeah, to protect those. Yeah.
Board, I would like to remind you and our patrons as well, the reason we're talking about turf on these fields, yes, it's around safety and durability. There was also an issue that we had a complaint filed in 2021 related to an OCR complaint around sex discrimination in Title IX. Because at the building and the number of softball and baseball teams that Francis Howell Central has, sharing the two fields, that we were not providing equitable opportunities for both our male and our female athletes. At that time, we reached an OCR resolution that led us to pulling the grass off of the infield each time we had a softball season so that we could create the smaller field, putting in the new fence, then having to re-put that in when it was time to go back to the baseball season, which had a cost that has continued to increase. And so, yes, there is a durability piece, there's a safety piece to the turf. It will also allow us to use that field safely for both teams throughout the school year.
And just for clarity, OCR, that 21 is Office of Civil Rights, for those who aren't familiar with all of that. Going back to your recommendations to look at lighting and drainage around the bleachers, at what point will you have kind of an estimate of cost for those? Do you have that already, or will you put that in the bid as an alternate and then we'll decide then? What's your recommendation?
Great question. Our process there is that we would get estimates on all of that before we go out to bid. So we would have an all-inclusive number for you. We will have hard costs and soft costs, including all base bid items, so the dugouts, the turf, those things. We will also have an estimate on all of our future items, our alternates. So that would be the lighting, if you want to add on to the dugouts, if we want to replace the concrete and the bleachers, the lighting. We'll have numbers for all of that. We'll show that to you guys before we ever go out to bid on what we think the cost will be. And then for the bids, if you would like us to, we will then take those as alternates on bid day. That way, after the bids, if we get a great price on the turf and the other work that we're doing, then if you guys want to proceed, then we can take some of those alternates to then maximize those dollars on bid day, because things will never be cheaper than they are right now. And some of those things will have an economy in terms of, if we decide to do the concrete around the bleachers, we're gonna have the guys there to do the concrete for that perimeter ring that I told you about that goes around the fencing. So you'll have concrete guys on staff already on this project. They're already gonna be on site, they'll be mobilized. It could be relatively cheap compared to having it done as a separate bid to do it during this project. So yes, it will be alternates on bid day, and then we'll bring those numbers back to you guys, and you guys can choose how you would like to move it.
Wonder, Mr. Stutzer, or anyone who can speak to this, what's the scenario with FHN? Do we have lights there on the new school, on these fields? Would this be the first school that has lights?
This project will be the first school in our district that, respective to softball, baseball, that has lights. None of our other sites have that. And just to add to that, one of the reasons that we've even brought that forward is one of the challenges that we have right now, specifically in the spring during baseball season, if we get, torrential rain pours and all of our programs are hosting, we get rained out. And so there's always a mad dash to contact other schools that have synthetic surfacing. And we have quite a few in the St. Louis area on whether we can, move our game to their facility. And that's a disruption to many things. That involves a phone call to transportation. Hey, do you have a trip bus that we can utilize to get, our co-curricular student athletes to that site to be able to play a game? And most often, what that results in is students leaving class early, whether it's, 7th or 8th hour, to get changed and dressed. And so that's something, as we look through this and talked with the building leaders on some of the challenges in Big Rocks that they face when we have weather, that we felt to be appropriate to bring forward for consideration.
So that sounded like an argument for turf, but not necessarily the lights, right?
For both, really, respective to kind of what we're discussing tonight. The lights as kind of the alternate piece of it.
So I can speak that a little bit. Our home field, where my son plays baseball, he'll be a senior next year. We have one high school that does have turf, one that does not. So when we do have those rain days and both teams are scheduled to play, we can play the home field team there, and then after that game, our team will then travel for a 6 o'clock first pitch, right, instead of a 4 and 6. So that allows us to go from about 6 to 8 p.m. and get that second game in. That way we can play, both games in a single day. So that's how we've used it in the past. That's how we've seen it used. And I can see you guys using that if Francis Howell Central is the only school currently that will have turf for right now. There could be a rain out. Francis Howell Central could play at 4. Francis Howell could come over and play a game at 6. And you're not traveling, a distance to get to a field. It's still in district. So there is some benefit to it, and it does increase the usability of that field from time to time. So that is a benefit, but that's just, something to weigh as a positive potential. So when we come back from bid day, you can kind of take that consideration on that number.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Rumpus, I wonder if we can get an opinion from, or you guys can, over the next month or so, talk to the athletic directors and get their thoughts on how desirable this actually is, how realistically if this would be a benefit or not.
We'd be happy to provide that.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Oh, did you have another?
I just want to make sure that, I have clarity. So are you talking about the alternate respective to lights?
To lights, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. All right. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the financial report as presented.
So moved. Second.
Director Blair, Director Harmon, Ms. Embry.
Good evening. I promise this will be perhaps the most brief financial report I provided you so far. So this evening, our very brief financial report includes our typical general budget summary information. As you can see, this does represent the 2024-2025 fiscal year. A reminder that June 30 represented our fiscal year end, and so the team in the finance department is busy working through reconciliations and preparing for audit work to be conducted. But what you can see here is that based on the original ending fund balance information, June 30, we are projecting for a 31.16% ending fund balance at June 30 of 2025. We do not have budget amendments for you at this point in time, too early for that, but we're confident we'll bring those forward in the months to come. Another reminder that the bond financial statement is posted each month under financial reports and provided for your handy reference. We did add back in, based on some of the changes relative to this information, the costly elementary Phase 2 HVAC. That was part of our commitment that as we see changes in the available funds, we will add projects back in. If we ended up with enough available funds, and currently that number that's so tiny is $2.561 million, our next prioritized project would be Sager for HVAC work. So just keeping you apprised of those changes. And again, as a reminder, that year-end process will have auditors in very soon. They've already done some preliminary work in June. They'll be back, as the dates are noted there, in October and in November. And ultimately, we will bring forward to you not only the audit report, but also the final financial report that is provided to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We file that as a preliminary report to the state August 15th each year, but then continue to update it until it all ties out and is approved by the auditor. So you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Board, any questions?
An unrelated one. Have you heard anything from the audit of the Prop S funding?
The state audit we received zero information on that, nothing.
Earlier this summer, they indicated they're still working on the final report. So we're
Dr. Rumpus, was that like May or June, or do you remember? Just a guess.
It was in June, I believe. We heard from the manager of the office.
I did ask Mr. Myers, because he had helped with some of the lagging requested information, that he notify the lead that he was departing at the end of June, and that prompted just an additional engagement, but no real information or questions have been.
Well, they have your information on file too.
They do.
Okay.
And Dr.
You're not going anywhere.
Dr. Rumpus.
You're not going
That is
anywhere.
correct.
Right, I want that in writing.
That is correct.
We have it in writing. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Listen closely, board. Board, like a motion to approve the addendum and property schedule number 10 between American Capital Financial Services, Inc. and Francis Howell R3 School District, which modifies and supplements the master tax exempt lease/purchase agreement dated July 15th, 2016, and authorizes Chief Finance and Operations Officer to execute the associated documents as presented. Okay.
You might consider that may have been written by an attorney, potentially.
We have a first by Director Harmon. Anyone want to second that one?
I'll second it.
Director Owens, thank you. Mrs. Embry, can you explain this one to us?
Well, so the easy explanation is that back in May, during the board meeting in May, and then during the board meeting in June, you approved the purchases of technology for the district for some refreshing cycles. And one of those purchases was with CDWG, and the other was with Apple, so a variety of devices throughout the district. And at that time, it was indicated that we would provide you with lease information for financing that. It's very common that districts perform a 5-year lease on matters of technology, and this is part of that refresh. So the last time that these particular devices that you approved in May and June were refreshed back in 2020, and so they are up for that new cycle. The total of the principal lease is $1,634,672.33. The interest rate is 5.582%. We did post on board docs the repayment schedule for your information. All of the lease documentation has been vetted by legal counsel, and it does require that legal counsel provide an opinion letter about the lease. So that has all been perfected.
Board, any questions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Board would like a motion to approve the purchases as presented.
So moved.
Director Harmon.
Second.
Thank you. Director Owens. Any discussion on purchases, questions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Okay. Just an informational item for the community. We have one curriculum document, Woodworking 3, on the agenda. So if anyone's interested in that upcoming, please take a look at that curriculum and provide your feedback to the board as you see fit. Next, we have some policy items for a first and second reading and vote. These are the 4,000 policies. So board would like a motion to approve the 4,000 regulations as presented.
So moved. Second.
Director Blair, Director Harmon. Any discussion, board? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Next, we have an informational item, first reading of policy and regulation, R6241. Or is there any discussion on this one? I'm happy to go first if anyone else does.
Do you want to start with board comments, or do you want to see if there's an admin to speak to some of those?
I do. I have some. We'll ask for admin feedback on the library pieces, which are 6310 and 6341. That's my intention there. So, since I wasn't here last month, unfortunately, due to friendly skies, I'd like to briefly start with some background about policy and regulation 6241. So the current challenge materials policy and regulation 6241 is geared towards instructional materials, and this is evidenced in part by the fact that it's housed in section 6200, which is titled Instruction. Section 6300 of our policies is for learning commons, media, and technology service. So the little bit of legal guidance there is regarding the removal of challenged materials from school does draw a distinction between instructional materials and materials available in a school library. So therefore, a single challenge materials policy is insufficient in my view, or would need to be overly complex to continually distinguish between instructional materials and library materials. So for this reason, policy 6241 has been retitled from challenged materials to challenged instructional materials, and a new policy has been proposed titled Challenged Learning Common Materials, and that's the 6341 policy. The new policy, Challenged Learning Commons Materials, is appropriately housed in section 6300 and is numbered 6341. So I hope that clears up some of the reasoning behind why 6241 and 6341 are very similar, but different in a few important ways. Regarding the content of policy and regulation 6241, which is what we're going to discuss here in this section, as I mentioned, it's proposed to be renamed from challenged materials to challenged instructional materials. So since I wasn't present at the last board meeting, I did watch, and I'd like to just address some of the commentary made by board members at the June 20th meeting. So at that meeting, Director Blair opened his comments about 6241 by stating that the revisions cross out the word freedom a lot, and then suggested that somebody may want to do a count as to how many times the revisions crossed out the word freedom. So I've done just that. The word freedom appears 3 times across both the existing policy and the regulation. The word freedom appears in existing policy 6241 twice. So there's policy and there's regulation. So in the policy it's in there twice, in the regulation it's once. So in the policy, the mentions refers to the principles of academic freedom and the freedom to read. So it's well known that K through 12 teachers do not have the kind of academic freedom that's enjoyed by higher education. So to suggest that academic freedom supersedes the board's role is misleading anyone who reads this policy. As for the freedom to read, I don't believe anyone's infringing on anyone's freedom to read, but the notion that the freedom to read would be used as a defense of a teacher using improper instructional materials in the classroom doesn't really work for me, and is therefore an odd statement in a policy about instructional materials. Is a student free to read about cars during a lesson on human sexuality? Yes, he is. There may be consequences of not paying attention, but he certainly is free to read that. But I don't see how a mention of that freedom in a policy is relevant whatsoever to the question of whether the materials being used by the teacher meet the state guidelines on human sexuality instruction, and that is the point of this policy. The challenging of instructional materials. If the board decides a resource used in human sexuality instruction falls outside the scope of the curriculum, then we are free to decide as much and omit the resource from the district. That is wholly different from infringing on a student's right to read that resource on his own time at home, at the public library, or even on his personal cell phone or device on school grounds, provided that content, of course, doesn't violate other policies regarding the use of personal devices. The third instance of the word freedom is used in the existing regulation in a section about the American Library Association's Library Bill of Rights. Since this policy and regulation going forward will not have anything to do with the library, but rather on instructional material, the entire section on the Library Bill of Rights is irrelevant and was struck out. So I hope that clears up any confusion on the point of the word freedom. Next, there's a suggestion that every book is guilty until proven innocent. Since the June draft of this regulation had a provision whereby challenged instructional materials, except primary textbooks, would be removed from use pending further review, I understand the concern. I think it's been addressed. The concern here is that if, or at least my initial concern was if there was something that was wholly inappropriate in an instructional material, we didn't want children exposed to it after the district had been made aware of a potential problem. This is a risk and a liability to the district. Of course, on the other hand, I realize there may be instances where items are challenged that aren't necessarily a legal risk if continued in use until the review is complete. So this matter was discussed at length during the last policy committee meeting, and we landed on the language in the current draft on the agenda today, which states that the superintendent or his designee may remove the material at his discretion pending a review after a challenge is made, provided the material is not a primary resource. We realize that if an ELA teacher is teaching, say, Romeo and Juliet, that we can't very well have someone challenge it and disrupt plans for the entire academic unit. However, if a teacher is using, say, a risque article from a website or video to supplement the instruction of Romeo and Juliet, and that particular item was challenged, then we would give the superintendent the authority to decide if a challenge is made, whether there's a risk in leaving that resource in place while the challenge is going forward. So I think the matter has been addressed, and I think it's been satisfactorily resolved to the best of my knowledge. Next, Director Blair brought up a concern about parent rights and expressed his displeasure that a certain phrase was struck from the policy. That phrase states, "No parent or guardian have the right to determine reading, viewing, or listening matter for other students other than their own." Now, I can see how striking that out may seem shocking to some people. However, the presence of that phrase in the policy is meaningless when you compare other sentences in the policy, and I'll explain this further. The existing policy, the policy that's in place today, the very first sentence states, "Any resident or employee of the district may formally challenge learning resources used in the district's educational program on the basis of appropriateness." Again, this is existing policy. So any resident or employee, regardless of whether they're a parent or not, may challenge material. So a challenge implies that a fair process will be used to determine the appropriateness of said material, and the challenge could result in the material being removed. In essence, the policy is the sole purpose, the policy is the sole purpose of citizens, be they parents or not, determine what will be used in school for instruction of all students. If that's not the case, how can we state further down in the policy that no parent has the right to determine the reading, viewing, or listening for other students other than their own? These two statements do not jive together. For that matter, many of the teachers are parents, and they determine what students other than their own will read all of the time. The only way the two statements can live in harmony is that if we say only patrons who are not parents are able to challenge the materials. I think we all realize the lunacy of that. So the fact is, no challenge actually restricts anyone's right to read, and no one is going to tell your child what he can or cannot read. A challenge merely says that we have the right to determine how public funds are expended and what materials are available in K through 12 schools. Since we have a responsibility to do what's in the best interest of all students, we cannot leave in materials that we feel are inappropriate. Next, Director Blair raised a concern about the fact that the president would be involved in the selection of laypersons on the review committee. Director Blair mentioned he does not like this because he thinks that any president in the near future will be endorsed by a political action committee, and that seems to be reason enough not to have the president involved in the process. The endorsement of a PAC is not some scarlet letter that says the person cannot be fair and objective, so I fundamentally disagree with this objection. This language that would require the president of the board to offer suggestions for lay people for the committee is actually part of the template from the Missouri Consultants for Education, MCE, which is the policy service the district pays for. This is not language I came up with in a vacuum, and I suspect it's used in districts across the state. The fact that someone has to pick lay people and to trust the unelected school staff to select all the committee members is one of the loudest concerns I have heard, and I share, about the current process for developing review committees. If we're going to bother to have a committee, the public needs to have trust that it will be a fair committee, and I have proposed that some members are chosen by the president and some by the administration. The review committees are not required by law or statute. The review committee is there to provide a review by people partly inside the bubble of education and partly outside the bubble, and report to the superintendent so that he can carry out the recommendation of the committee. Not having these committees would save everyone time and effort from forming the committees, reading, meeting, reporting, their volunteer time, and so on. But if we are to have a committee, there has to be a fair process to it. Director Owens brought up the fact that teachers would be on these committees and asked about subs, extra pay, and so forth. The current policy has teachers on there, so I'm confident that the practices around those questions that are currently used will be used going forward. That's a detail I'm perfectly comfortable leaving to the administration to address, as they have successfully done in the past. So, with that, happy to entertain any other discussion, but I think that covers most of the board discussion from last meeting, and I appreciate you giving me that time here. So.
I want to say thank you to Vice President Cook for a number of things. One, sometimes work just doesn't allow you to get back for a board meeting, and that's what happened last meeting. You weren't here for any malintentioned reason. Sometimes airplanes are late, and your absence at the last meeting was nothing besides the result of airplane type stuff. And so I just want to acknowledge that. I want to thank you for allowing us just to quickly run through a couple things. And I appreciate you sharing some of those comments already out loud, so I don't need to repeat them. So this is not really for us debating this. This is really just sharing an idea. If somebody has an idea for Director Puskar or Director Harmon, Director Owens, if there's something here that you just want to lift up and say, I really like this part, I want us to look into this part, I think that would be helpful. Just really briefly, on policy 6241, one thing I did not share last time is there's a line that says every effort will be made to provide materials that present all points of view concerning international, national, local problems and issues of our times. I just want to say I don't believe that the nature of that sentence intends to present all views on issues like is Nazism good or bad? Did slavery happen? Did it not happen? Was it bad? Was it not bad? Was the Holocaust a hoax or not a hoax? I just want to make sure this idea of all points of view, just clear language that untruthful claims like the Holocaust is a hoax does not count as a point of view that we want to present. Also, I think having some clarity around hate speech not being allowed as a acceptable point of view, regardless of what the topic is. Maybe we use the definition by Oxford Dictionary or whatever, something like that, but just clear, because I don't think that was your plan to include that. But just want to make sure there's clear language on policy 6241.
So just for clarity, that's an existing, you didn't put that in, that's from the existing.
Correct.
That's what I see.
Right, and I agree, like there's things that could be cleaned up, and Director Cook's desire to clean up or make things clearer isn't a bad desire to have. To make things clearer can be really helpful for a community to identify their values and how those values get lived out in policies and regulations. So the desire to review this is not, in my mind, objectionable. So yes, so that is just something that might need to be clarified. The regulation, I did want to identify that you did make a improvement regarding material being removed, the whole guilty before, guilty until proven innocent. That could be extremely disruptive, and so the modification, I think, reflects you listening to the library media specialist last week, and I appreciate that. My concern about the content of who makes up a review committee is because the board president would create a list of 8 people who the district superintendent picks, and those 8 people could be of one ideological background or another, and the board president also has a role in making sure the board member on that committee might actually be similar to theirs as well. So what that does is it creates a 9-person committee where 5 of them are connected to the board president. At the last meeting, I think President Bertrand said that he personally wouldn't want that particular responsibility. Now, what that looks like, 9 people, I think there's a lot of different ways to make sure it identifies the values, to make sure there's community members, and whatever that recipe is, this isn't for here, I just want to name that part. The other part would be that when the review committee makes a decision, it would come to the board, and the board shall vote to accept or reject the recommendation. I'm not sure how many times the review committee will want to meet knowing that no matter how many hours of work they put into it, it's our decision that's yes or no. And I think there might be value in having that go to a reconsideration committee. Because again, it says here, the decision of the board will be final. The last little piece, the criteria for what is allowed or isn't allowed, it's not listed in 6241, it's listed in other places, but in the current version of 6241, it does make a reference that the criteria for learning resources include educational significance, age appropriateness of materials, and that's something that I don't think people may be aware is already in there. But I think that's a strength of the current regulation. May be able to say age appropriateness of materials, especially as it relates to sexual content, violence, and drug use. I think those are things that they're currently thinking about, but if we wanted to make that more specific, explicit, that might be helpful. And I think that might be, and then it's a small concern, but it's listed here that we should have the email address and address for the superintendent of schools, and I would just amend that to be email address and work address for the superintendent of schools versus the superintendent of schools' home address. So those are just quick thoughts about 6241. Thank you for listening.
Any other feedback on this one?
Are we on just 634?
6241. 6241.
Yeah, I have just a few things I'm editing. Well, students do have First Amendment rights. I noticed you spoke about teachers, but students have legal rights, and they cannot be erased by deleting language in a policy.
I agree.
They still have these rights, so I would like that to still be in there. And discussing the committee consisting of 9 people, and only 3 are certified staff members. I think a trained education staff should have a strong voice at the table, since they have the most training on how to implement curriculum. And I know you said it came from Missouri Consultants for Education, but I see it differently, because the decisions being made will directly impact their effectiveness in the classroom. So I think we should rely heavily on the educators. Also, when the president is the sole appointer of people to vote on to be on the committee, I think that is a way to stack a committee and doesn't have a good look. I mean, I'm not saying that somebody would do something, but there's a possibility for it, and you want to take that away. And then referring to the Library Bill of Rights in the classroom, I think it's still called a classroom library. So I would like to see the Library Bill of Rights respected in this language here. And I don't like that we removed principles of the freedom to read, listen, and view. I think that's important. I do like freedom, and I like it said out loud, and I like it in print. I'm editing, I'm not reading everything. So is that just 62 right now? 6241?
Yes.
Okay, and why is the reconsideration committee eliminated? That was another question I had.
It's not eliminated. The entire policy is the formation and creation of a review committee or reconsideration committee.
After the fact?
No, if someone challenges an instructional material that's not a primary resource, then this policy and this regulation is what spells out the formation and the
Yeah, it just
this policy is for the review.
Right, there was just so much removed. I didn't understand, because these have been well thought out and discussed by a lot of people, and I didn't like to see everything erased like that and made so short and concise. I think we're leaving out things.
Okay. Laura?
I'd like to say something about the regulation for 6241. It says something, I had it up here and I just lost it again, about a secret ballot of the votes for the, hang on, where is it, Randy? Home here.
It's number 10.
Okay. It says that the votes will be by secret ballot in the interest of transparency. I disagree with that totally. I believe that if votes are made, that they need to be made public, understanding that the there's two sides to that. The people doing the voting may not want their votes to be made public, but I think it gives us more opportunity for transparency. If they are, nobody's forcing anybody to be on a committee, and nobody's forcing anybody to vote. So I think that the secret ballot is unfair to the people who pay the bills, which are the constituents, and I'd like to see that change. I'd also like for you, I know we're in first read, to consider the whole aspect of this review committee, and that is that a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of energy is put into it. What I'd like to recommend, and this is whether, it's up to you, Director Cook, whether or not you heed this advice or not, but you bring in a third party. There's companies out there that will check any book by ISBN number and give a read on whether or not they think it's age appropriate, and this is their opinion, but it's a third party, it's outside source, and then we employ that way of looking at these books, and then bringing that recommendation either to a review committee, so that basically their work is whether or not they have any issues with what the third party said, or to bring it directly to us. Probably having a review committee just review what the third party vendor did would be probably more applicable or more beneficial in the fact that there's that many more eyes that are laid upon the ISBNs or the books or whatever's questionable to find out whether anything's age appropriate. That's my feedback.
Thank you. Director Harmon, anything?
These are a lot of proposed changes, so this is the beauty of being on the school board, is your job isn't done after just making these statements. That your job is to follow up with Director Cook then, and let's incorporate these and then discuss them, just like we did in the open meeting in the policy committee last week, in a transparent manner. So, which I appreciate the transparency that's going on here, is the open discussion, but then following up so that we can all look at the proposed language and then come up with a product we're all happy with. So I don't want to add to it right now. I'll do it when everybody has all their stuff put together, and we'll figure it out.
Thank you for saying we'll all be happy with it. Thank you.
Let me amend that. How about a majority? No. Yeah. So we'll all be engaged.
So yes, good always happy to take feedback, and I'm sure we will get additional email from the community. I'll just say I'm happy to take the feedback, but I am not a fountain of policy words. I've done my very best, and sometimes that's not good enough on the first draft, and that's why we go through these processes. But when you say things, I've heard complaints or concerns, I guess I should say, about the 4 lay people being selected by the president or other, whatever that matter may be. And I guess I just have to say, if you have a suggestion on what to put in there that would be better, let's start feeding those ideas to me, and then there's got to be an idea there that can float to the top, and I don't have it. I've thought more hours than I care to mention about that, and
I always have a lot of ideas.
yeah, just start sending them over, and for the community too. There's the intent of that is to put trust in the community that this will be a fair committee. Yeah, that's the intent. So however that happens, I'm open, but
A fair and age appropriate.
And age appropriate, right. So, okay. If nothing else, we'll move on to the next item, which is 6310, policy and regulation, first read informational item. So, I think I'll take a point of privilege and go first here again. Much shorter, I promise.
You want to ask people? Yeah.
I will in just a second, yes. I think the objections raised to 6310 during the June 20th meeting to this set of policy and regulation have been addressed in the latest revisions. Not probably to the satisfaction of absolutely everyone, but I think everyone would agree that substantial changes have been made to 6310 since we first read that, and we've incorporated a lot of I've incorporated a lot of feedback. This is how the process was always supposed to work. We did a first read, we get feedback, we make changes as appropriate, and we end up with something better than what we started with. So I think it's important to acknowledge there's certainly some who won't be happy unless absolutely no changes are made, but it is the duty of the board to review and update policies and procedures on a regular basis. That itself is a policy 0510. So just to explain this policy in general in the shortest amount of words I can, this policy, my intent here is to set guardrails around what we as a community feel is age appropriate in our K through 12 school libraries. It also requires that all purchases for the Learning Commons or classroom libraries that are made with public funds be presented to the board and to the public as an informational item on a board meeting agenda prior to purchase. So this is really meant to have our community help us to ensure that we are not unwittingly purchasing materials that are not age appropriate. I think we'll all agree, no one's perfect. We can all make mistakes and overlook things from time to time. Together, staff and community work together to look out for the best interests of the children that we are charged with protecting and educating each year. So that's really the overarching goal here of this policy. So happy to take additional feedback, but there have been substantial changes made here, and as I said earlier, happy to take suggestions if you have them.
I'd like to make a suggestion about the portion about book fairs. Though I somewhat agree with what you're trying to do, I don't agree with, of course, how you're trying to do it. I don't think that the board should necessarily have to approve every book fair, but I do believe that the books that the book fair brings should be subject to the same criteria that the books in our libraries are, meaning that if there's an objectionable book that is brought by a book fair, it needs, it needs to be kept off of our property, period. Excuse me, point of order. Needs to be kept off of our property, and I think that's the intent, to keep profanity and egregious books off of our property. So I would suggest that, again, books that are coming onto our property in the form of a book fair, I don't know that we should maybe opt out of a certain company, but the egregious books. And so maybe the books that they intend to bring should be put through a third-party review that can look at ISBN numbers. They're fairly easy. It's easy to find those companies, and they're fair and balanced.
Dr. Rumpus, I wonder if you can speak a little bit about this, since this policy really and regulation revolve around collection development, which is to say how library books are brought into the school library or a classroom library. Can you speak a little bit about the process that we use currently in this?
I will be happy to defer to Dr. Buckman, or I believe we have a couple members of the academic team here who could speak specific to that process we currently have in place.
So your question is, how do we select a book for our school library?
I think that's the question, yeah.
And other materials.
Yeah.
I mean, our LMS curate the collection that, I've never been an LMS, so I would
Library
be
media
remiss
specialist.
or
Yes.
library media specialist. I'd be remiss to pretend like I know exactly all of the things that they consider when selecting, but student interest, making sure they have a wide collection. They have some guidelines that their professional organization provides. We look at reviews of the books before that they're purchased for the school libraries. And I mean, it's not a complex building their collection. I don't want to undervalue that. The determining if we're going to add it or not, we're looking at book reviews. They go through a large volume of books, so to ask them to read each book that they're putting in, things of that nature, that would really just be unrealistic, especially at the secondary level.
I agree.
Elementary too.
Any other discussion on 6310?
I had several things, and since it was rewritten, tell me if I'm wrong that this has been fixed, okay? First was removing provide materials and resources which reflect the ideals and beliefs of religious, social, political, historical, and ethnic groups and their contributions to American and world cultures. I didn't understand why that would be removed. I mean, I can send you all these.
Yes.
And then
yes.
there was another thing that really, I was really shocked about. Removing as they acquire critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Because a major thing I learned as an educator was to teach my students critical thinking skills. And I'm not sure everybody really knows what that means, but you can't effectively problem solve without critical thinking. Critical thinking is how to identify a problem, process and organize the information, and come up with solutions. Teachers we are not taught to spoon feed our students. We want our students to learn how to think for themselves. It's a very important concept, and I believe they're still teaching that ideal in schools, and I think it's a beautiful thing. Another thing that I found confusing was, according to different attorneys that I've read about, they said the removal of books that have already been selected for the library may be legally risky. They've already been selected in the proper way, and then somebody tries to take them out that apparently has some kind of legal ramifications, according to the PICO case. I don't know if you've read about that.
I've read it.
And then again, I'm going to hammer again on the American Library Association's Bill of Rights. I still think of it as a library. I mean, it might have a different name. I mean, it still has the word library in it. So I think that's important. As a student of the history of public schools in America, I learned that public schools were instituted in this country to build an educated citizenry. So I don't think that should be the phrase understanding of American freedoms through the development of informed and responsible citizens. I hold that dear because that's why we have public schools. That's why they were instituted, was to educate our citizenry so they become educated, good citizens and be able to contribute to a good society. This is important. This freedom is a cornerstone of American public education and should be honored as a basic right and also a duty of all Americans. And then I did not understand why the library media specialist was removed from collection development. Am I wrong on that? When I looked at what was crossed out, it looked like that the library media specialist was removed.
The library media specialist is central to collection development?
No, it was said that they were removed, that they were not.
There may have been one sentence that mentioned it.
Yeah.
In the context of something else that was struck out, but no, the library media specialist
Okay.
is still the
It was
person
just
primarily responsible.
the way it appeared
Selection.
to me. So, anyway, and it just, I don't know, this policy and regulation, it just kind of looks to me like we're saying we don't trust the library media specialist. And I don't know if that's probably not intended, but I think that's a real bad look. Because we hired them to do their job. And we need to trust them to do it.
Didn't we already establish that the library media specialist doesn't read every book, right? So are they reading every book that's going into the library?
No.
No,
No,
right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? I mean,
Something I read said different people are looking at the books and checking them, like a group.
I just want to make sure what I'm hearing is.
But do we have a library media specialist here that could speak to that, or is that inappropriate?
So,
I think we're at a first reading. I think we're just maybe identifying the issues
Okay.
we want to look into a little bit closer. And what I'm hearing you say is it might be good to have additional feedback that includes library media specialists between now and our next conversation. I think. Is that one of
That's basically most of what I put.
And I'll just go really quick. She said most of them, but regarding policy, I mean, she named a couple. Part of it is just difficulty identifying the word profanity. I mean, there's a lot of vagueness, even the description. This word versus that word, and how many times, and the reference to like sexual activity, like how graphic or not graphic, or there's just a lot of things that seem like it's so vague it might limit a person's ability to even want to order new books. I also want to identify like the word violence. Last month we had a reference to Hunger Games. Well, I'm not sure if anybody hasn't watched Hunger Games or read it. And there's a lot of killing at the end. It's kind of like a battle to the death at the end. But that's a different kind of violence than others. It's hard to identify. I just want to say, if I spoiled Hunger Games for you, I apologize. And then just really quickly on Regulation 6310. Again, the selection criteria to consider, I thought that was helpful to keep. And the, again, other things that Carolee mentioned, I just want to agree to that too. I'm okay.
All right, well, a lot thrown out there. I will just, I got to defend some things.
There's a
don't
lot
think I can
in
do
there.
them all, but the notion that we don't trust librarians. Again, the librarians are the people tasked with making all the recommendations, and these are the people who are selecting over 99% of our books currently, and will continue to do so if this is passed as is. With some of the concerns around profanity, this is a difficult one. I acknowledge. Right now, it's in there that I basically used what the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, considers indecent or profane and this is directly from the FCC's website, considers indecent or profane content that may not be broadcast between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. when there's a reasonable risk that children may be in the audience. So it's already established FCC policy that certain things cannot be said on TV and radio when there's a reasonable risk children will be in the audience. Our school libraries are 100% children. That this is the only audience for them. So I think that at a minimum it says we are well within our rights to put some limitation here, and what those profanity words are is on a case-by-case basis, and it goes on just like it would here. It's a complaint basis with the FCC. I'm not going to go through and name them, as someone here, one of our librarians, had the desire for me to do. I will not fulfill that desire, but you can Google the 7 profanity words. So, with respect to violence or anything else, these are all very hard things. I've heard mentioned that, well, the collection development guidelines are vague. Compare these to the existing guidelines and ask yourself which is more vague. I would ask yourself that. Yes, at the end of the day, there's a lot of everything is very subjective. It's case by case. It's hard to put rock solid definitions here. I asked several librarians if we can put into writing what they currently use. I was unsuccessful to get a written, description of how we would define profanity or how we would do sexually explicit content and so forth. So once again, I was less to try to take all the feedback and come up with it here, because no one else seems to be willing to throw anything out. So by all means, if people have suggestions, email them. Maybe there's one out there that's better than mine, but when everyone's criticizing and not submitting ideas, there's only so much I can do. I only have so many words in my vocabulary. All right, anything else on 6310? All right, moving on to 6341, policy and regulation, first read, informational. I guess I'll start this by asking Dr. Rumpus or the administration. This policy actually is the one I mentioned earlier that would be challenges for any materials that are in school libraries or classroom libraries. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the current process if someone challenges a school library book, which has been done a few years ago, what that current process looks like.
Yeah, I'm actually going to invite Dr. Lammers. He's our director of curriculum up, and he would be the one that would facilitate that process. In fairness, we haven't had one in a while, so since he's been in this role, he hasn't had to lead that process up, but he can talk to you a little bit about what the process does look like.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, it's been since January of 2022 since we last had a formal book challenge. So under current regulation, currently under 6241, any resident or employee of the district can issue a, in layman's terms, book challenge, but a request for consideration is really the formal language. Our standard procedures before it even ever gets to something like that, at the beginning of the year, each year we ask our principals to remind staff what parents' rights are with relation to challenging materials, and if they are to contact them about a certain material, then they're to accommodate that for their student and work with them and building administration to find an alternate resource for them to use. Essentially, when a challenge is initiated, it begins at the building level, and they start with a conversation with the principal. And through the stages of the challenge, we do not limit access to the material during the reconsideration process. The major criterion of those early conversations is the appropriateness of the material for its intended educational use. So there's usually an initial conversation that's had with library media specialists, sometimes us, about does the material in question, does it meet the selection criteria that's outlined in policy and regulation. And there have been cases when we looked at that and said, this resource doesn't actually meet those, and we don't really need to go through an entire committee. It doesn't meet our selection criteria, so we do feel confident pulling that from this level and potentially making it available at another level or just pulling it in general. And every attempt is made to resolve the matter initially at the building level. And then the parent or whoever has issued that request for consideration is given a copy of the relevant policies and is given a form that they can fill out if that building level resolution is not satisfactory. They can fill it out and they submit it to me. So when it comes to the district level for review, the petitioner submits the form to me. We then notify the principal that this book or this resource, it doesn't have to necessarily be a book, it can be a magazine, it can be something online. We notify the principal that this is happening and that it originated in their building. And then we would be tasked with forming a reconsideration committee. So I would work with the principal of that building in the formation of the committee according to what's outlined in 6241. So the membership would include the person who filled out the form, the petitioner. It would include myself, 2 teachers from the impacted grade level or subject, 2 students if it is a high school level. So if it's below high school, it would not include students. 2 library media specialists, 1 from the impacted school, a board member, and 4 lay persons. And the way current policy or current regulation outlines for us to identify those 4 lay persons is to email people who are currently involved in parent involvement committees at that level. If we get too many responses for the number of seats that we have available, there's a random drawing. If we don't get enough from that initial salvo, initial invitation, then we email other committees, so like booster clubs and other parents that we know are heavily involved in the schools. One of the requirements is that at least 2 of the parents must be from that level. So at least 2 of the parents have to be from elementary if it's an elementary thing, or from high school if it's a high school thing. The regulation does allow me to appoint other committee members as deemed appropriate. But when I look through all 23 of the challenges that we've had since 1987, I didn't see that happen even one time. And then the role of the committee is to examine and read the resource, to determine the professional acceptance by reading critical reviews, to weigh the positives and negatives of that resource, and to form opinions based on the material as a whole rather than passages taken out of context. The committee then discusses the resource in context of the overall educational program, and the committee then takes a vote where they vote either to retain without restriction, retain with restriction, and that can look like, this probably doesn't really belong in an elementary school, but it would be more appropriate for an elementary, or for a middle school or another level, things of that nature, or to not be retained. After the vote, I would prepare a written report with the decision, the rationale, and I would not identify the votes of the individual members of the committee. I would mail a copy of that report and the appeal process to the petitioner within 5 days of that vote. Under current regulation, that decision of that committee is binding, and we provide a report to the Board of Education as an informational item. A copy of that report is provided to all library media specialists, and they are tasked to retain it. I also would retain a copy both digitally and in paper. And under 6241, after a challenge, the material cannot be re-challenged for 5 years. The report is made publicly available as that informational item on board docs. And then when that is made public, the petitioner and any community member may appeal the decision within 14 days of its publication, and the Board of Education would then review the report and make a decision that is expected to be consistent with policy and regulation 6241. So that's the current challenge procedures for library resources.
Did you say that the committee hasn't had a meeting since 2022?
January of 2022.
We're talking about the challenge committee.
Yes, request for considerations, yes.
Have books been challenged?
Not since I've been in the role, and I don't have any.
Just to clarify, the committee is formed each time a book is challenged. So there's not a consistent committee that meets on a regular basis. When a book is challenged, we form the committee. The committee runs the process. And so each time the committee is formed, it's made up of different people.
I understand. Do you know how many books have been removed after a challenge?
Since 1987, I saw one that was removed. I saw several that they were maybe taken out of elementary and made available to other levels. And there have been other times when things were, a person didn't fill out a formal challenge, but a concern came up at the building level. They talked with us. We looked at the resources as library media specialists, and we decided that it didn't make a lot of sense and that it could come out in the next reading cycle. So there have been cases where books have been taken out after a concern has been raised, but the parent didn't fill out the formal form.
And also just to remind our parents who are listening, as well as other patrons, you do have the ability as a parent to monitor and see books your child does have checked out of the library. You can log in through their Active Directory credentials to see the books they currently have. And the system also does allow you to sign up for a daily email anytime your child would have books checked out of the library.
Unfortunately, not all children are blessed enough to have parents that are involved, or parents that, you know what I'm saying, guardians that care. And those are the kids that I worry about as well. Point of order.
So I just want to clarify, since 1987, basically 5 books have been impacted, either removed from the schools or moved to a different grade.
I wouldn't be able to land on a very specific number on that, but I do have the records, and I read through all of the records in preparation for this meeting. There have been a handful, I would call it a handful, that have either been moved to a different level, and there has been one that was flat out removed.
In acknowledging that's the formal process, I've only been in the district for 8 years. I am aware of 1 or 2 books where when a patron or parent raised the concern that the librarian at the building level, they actually agreed, and through that informal process, the decision was made to move a book, remove a book.
I don't have any questions. I just had a couple quick comments about 6341.
Thank you.
Just again, being as quick as possible, for the policy, again, ask the question, the definition of vulgar or educational suitability, there's a definition of obscene, but clear definitions would be helpful. For the regulation, there's a reference to 9 copies being questioned shall be removed from use or curriculum to be made available for the review committee. There could be some situations where if those 9 copies were removed, students don't have access to that material, that title, and that could be like an unintentional censorship that we want to avoid. Again, there's another reference that the board will receive the report from the review committee, then they vote to either accept or reject the recommendation, which again, I think that might not incentivize the review committee to put all the effort, because at some point it's either us saying yes or no. So I would suggest, again, it goes from a review committee, and then if somebody wants to appeal it, it might go to a reconsideration committee. That language is in here elsewhere. And just lastly, just want to identify that the library media specialists have a lot of different criteria that they have earned, whether it's credentials or education, and those are actually listed. One of our Q&As you see in board docs, and when we hire somebody, they're checking all those boxes, and I think that identifies a level of expertise that I like to value. The last piece is that it's good for us to spend time on what we agree on. Like we agree on that their parents have rights. We agree that pornography should not be in the hands of like little kids, and all the question has to do with like where you draw the line and which value takes precedence. And I just want to say there's more in common with the 5 of us than we might otherwise have thought. And I think we can live out a leadership that acknowledges that we share some of those same common values. The question is which value takes the lead, which one's in the driver's seat, passenger seat. For me, the biggest concern behind all this is that currently library media specialists and parents are in the center of all these decisions, and these policies would push the board into the center for all these decisions. And for me, that feels like board overreach. And for me, I would prefer if library media specialists and parents were in the center of these decisions and the board played a role. The question is what the role is, right? But the board played a role, but not the central role. So thank you all for listening.
I just had something to add to what he said, a lot of things I was going to say, but tell me if I'm wrong here, that the library media specialists are not included in the configuration of the review committee on 6341, is that correct? I saw that it said they may not be, or their cohorts or something like that.
That's correct, yeah. The library media specialists, it's been revised where they would submit a report to the committee.
Right.
With their opinion on the challenge.
I'm not understanding that. I find it unusual that they would be able to write one statement of opinion and they cannot discuss any other aspects of the challenged material. So, in other words, keep your opinion to yourself. We don't want to hear it. I think that's weird, and I think it's disrespectful. And I think it's overreach also.
So I'm sure you have proposed language then you'll be submitting to Director Cook then?
I can come up with that, yes.
I would include them.
So, the key aspect of this policy is defining under what circumstances can a book be removed from the school library or any classroom library. So, the proposed policy states, and I'm quoting here, the Board of Education shall remove materials from the Learning Commons if they are deemed to be obscene as defined by section 573.010 of the Missouri statutes. So the definition of obscene here is codified in state statute and flows down from a Supreme Court ruling in Miller v. California. It's also known as the Miller test. The test goes like this, and now I'm going to read directly from the statute. Any material or performance, if taken as a whole, applying contemporary community standards, its predominant appeal to the prudent interests in sex, and the average person applying contemporary community standards would find the material depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive way, and a reasonable person would find the material lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So that's the obscene test. Very difficult to meet, and if it's obscene, we are required to remove it. So that's not in there currently. That's not in the current policy, but we are required to do it, so it's in there now. I hope that one is uncontroversial. So for something to be required obscene, all three of those conditions must be met. It's a very high bar to meet, and I'll be the first to say I doubt we have anything like that that passes that, for even the first bar, to be honest here. So the policy, as proposed, goes on to state the board may remove materials from the Learning Commons if they are deemed to be pervasively vulgar or lack educational suitability. The board may not remove materials from the Learning Commons because they dislike the ideas contained in those materials and seek, by their removal, to prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion. So all of that language comes directly from the Supreme Court case of Island Trees v. Pico, which you referred to earlier. That's easily the best known, if not the only Supreme Court case involving removal of materials from a school library. While it was a plurality decision, meaning there was no opinion to which a majority of the justices signed on to, the plurality opinion by Brennan, which had the highest number of justices who concurred, is widely seen as the precedent for the last 40 years. This language all aligns with that plurality decision. As for the definition of what is pervasively vulgar, those are two words that any person can look up in the dictionary. The term educationally unsuitable was not defined by the court, and to the best of my knowledge hasn't been since, but is left up to the local school boards that are elected by their local community. As for me, the Missouri Constitution in Article 9, Section 1A clearly defines the purpose of free public schools. It states, a general diffusion of knowledge and intelligence being essential to the preservation of rights and liberties of the people, the General Assembly shall establish and maintain free public schools. So personally, and this is just Randy Cook, if I were to attempt to define whether something's educationally suitable, that's where I'd start with the Missouri Constitution, and I would go down from there. It defines the purpose of what free public education in Missouri is for. That statement would be the guide on educational suitability, and anyone submitting or defending a challenge on the grounds of educational suitability, I think should speak to that section of the Missouri Constitution at a minimum. So, as for other feedback on the challenge, I think, or this particular policy, again, happy to take it. I will just briefly mention, Director Blair, you mentioned if the review committee, if the decision of the review committee is appealed by the petitioner, then maybe it should go to a reconsideration committee. I think there's a terminology issue there. This is a reconsideration committee. It would be like doing the process twice, this process twice. So right now the process is really, in that respect, the same as it is now, where we form a committee The committee does the work. If the petitioner or the person who originally had the concern isn't satisfied with the outcome of the committee, then they can appeal to the board, and the board makes the final decision. If they don't appeal to the board, then the board never gets involved. So that's hopefully clears up some of that.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Superintendent comments. Dr. Rumpus.
Thank you, Vice President Cook. First, I would like to welcome and introduce our new district leaders who began in their roles in July 1st. We're here tonight. Mr. Mark Delaney, while not new to the district, but is new to his role as our Deputy Superintendent. We have Mr. Scott Gowan, Santa Wave, our new Director of Technology. Dr. Angeline O'Neill Hogreff returns to Francis Howell as our Director of Data and Assessment and High Schools. We have Dr. Kevin Morrison joining us as our Director of Student Services. Dr. Brian Rich, who joined us last year at Hollenbeck, is now over here as our new Director of Human Resources. And Ms. Julie Walsh, who isn't here with us tonight, but is our new Director of Finance. And we're really excited about this team of exceptional leaders and the impact that they're going to have on our team and on the district as we move forward. I'd like to take a moment and also celebrate 2024 Howell High graduate Titus Sissel on being drafted by the Arizona Diamondbacks on Tuesday. He actually becomes the 16th Viking to be selected in the MLB draft, which is kind of amazing. That full list, if you want to see, of our student athletes who have been drafted in the major leagues is posted on the district's Facebook page. We learned just 2 weeks ago that our District 2024 Teacher of the Year, Nicole Ashraff, who's a 5th grade teacher at Cosley, has been selected as one of the 10 St. Louis regional finalists as Teacher of the Year. Give her a round of applause. She will now be considered for the Missouri State Teacher of the Year Award and potentially the National Teacher of the Year of the Award. And we really have an incredible history as a district of producing teachers who not only are selected here locally, but move on through the state process. If you haven't yet heard, Hannah Scharfenberg, who is a bus router for the district, placed first in the Missouri Association for People Transportation 50th Annual School Bus Driver Competition this summer, which qualified her to represent Missouri at the international competition in Texas 3 weeks ago, where she achieved 6th place in the convention bus category. We are proud of her and that she chooses to work for the district, and also want to use this opportunity to remind you that we have plenty of bus driver and monitor openings for next year, so please visit our website. And we do offer training. If you don't need your CDL, we will put you through the training and compensate you for it. So please come work for us. We continue to invite everyone to join us for the opening celebration of the new Francis Howell North High School, which, while it will serve those students in feeder patterns, really is a celebration for this district. That'll take place on Saturday, August 24th during Black and Gold Day. We'll do a ribbon cutting ceremony at 2 o'clock and the formal presentation followed by an open house and student-led tours for the next couple of hours. Yes, it is the middle of summer, but I want to make sure that our parents know that school supply lists are out and that the registration process is in full swing for next year. As a reminder, this is the first time that online enrollment is mandatory for parents to go through, and so we have tried to make that information handy to our parents in a variety of different ways. It's been emailed to parents if they need the information. It's also available on the website for them to find. We are excited as we gear up already in the next couple of weeks for the new school year. We welcome our new educators, around 150 new staff that will be joining us on August 5th for a week of learning and onboarding. And then our returning teachers come back on August 12th, followed by our students on Tuesday, the 20th. And as we kick off the 24-25 school year, just want to share, I'm excited to continue to work with the 7 of you, our leadership team, staff, students, and community as we really work to make sure that Francis Howell continues to get even better. This fall, we will be finalizing our strategic plan. We know there are other community issues and concerns that we're hearing about: bullying, behavior and discipline, the need to recruit and retain high-quality staff and teachers, and recognize that those are opportunities for us to really come together and work together to review and work on some of those issues. And it's really an opportunity for us to come together, as has been said several times tonight, and focus on the many things that we do agree on in this district that are positive. It's an honor and privilege to be in this role, and now both as an employee and a parent in the district, I'm being committed to continue to do the best we can for the students and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rumpus. Any Board of Education comments?
Yes, please.
Sure, Director Owens.
When I was elected to serve on the Francis Howell School Board, I was anxious to share my education background and classroom experience with the other members of this board. I will continue to seek a collaborative working relationship with my fellow board members. I appreciate that the board will now have a workshop regarding these new policies and regulations. I do think it is a good idea to continually refine and add good policy that has been created with many voices in the room. When we collaborate with administration, policy committee, FHEA, education experts, parents, and students, and take into account legal requirements, we will bring forth the best policies and regulations for all of our stakeholders. During my 32 years as a teacher, I witnessed many attacks on public education, and they are still going on. But I always felt the school board had my back because they trusted me. I want our education professionals to know I will continue to trust them to do the job they were hired to do, and I will do all I can to provide a safe, healthy, challenging, and welcoming learning environment for each and every student.
First, I'd like to welcome all the new members to the team. Names escape me sometimes, so thank you, Carolee. Yeah, and so we all look forward to working with you. And if there's anything that we can do to help you achieve your goals, please don't hesitate to ask us. I'd like to also welcome the new president of the FHEA, and I actually look very forward to working with her. I found that we have a very common link, and that is our dogs. And so, as a good point to start a good relationship, I look forward to collaborating with her and the rest of the members. Before I get into what I really want to talk about tonight, I want to say that I never have been invited to a Francis Howell Forward meeting. So for those of you complaining about a meeting that I attended last Tuesday that you didn't get invited to, please invite me to one of yours. There are also some complaints tonight about not hearing about a certain resolution. Well, there's also a policy that's been sitting out there for the last 9 months, and that's policy 2116, privacy in bathrooms and locker rooms. And so I'd like to talk about that and discuss why maintaining separate bathrooms and locker rooms for boys and girls is essential for the well-being, privacy, and safety of all students. I want you to picture and what most people don't talk about. They talk about the bathrooms, but they don't talk about the locker rooms, which to me is a much bigger issue than just the bathrooms. For the opportunity for a male to disrobe in front of a female without her consent, to me is just one of the worst things that can happen to a young lady, and vice versa. It goes both ways. First and foremost, bathrooms and especially locker rooms are intimate spaces where students rightfully expect a certain level of privacy. Boys and girls have different needs and comfort levels, particularly during their developmental years. By providing gender-specific facilities, we ensure that each student can have a sense of security and privacy, which is crucial for their emotional and psychological well-being, not just a few, but all students. Separating these spaces helps to prevent potential issues of harassment or bullying in mixed gender environments. The risk of inappropriate behavior can increase, making some students feel vulnerable or unsafe. By maintaining distinct areas for boys and girls, we create a safer environment where students can focus on their education and personal development without fear of discomfort or intrusion. We must also consider the perspectives of parents and guardians who trust us to provide a safe and supportive environment for their children. Many parents feel strongly that gender-specific bathrooms and locker rooms are necessary to protect their children's privacy and dignity. Ignoring these concerns can lead to a breakdown in trust between the school and families, which is detrimental to our entire school district. Furthermore, our current facilities are designed with gender-specific use in mind. Converting them to commingled spaces would require significant financial investment and logistical planning, diverting resources away from other essential educational needs, And in a time when budgets are tight, we must prioritize spending on initiatives that directly benefit our students' learning experiences as well as invest in their safety. It's also important to recognize that maintaining gender-specific facilities does not preclude us from being inclusive and respectful of all students' identities. We will provide accommodation for those who may feel uncomfortable in traditional gender-specific spaces, such as single occupancy restrooms or private changing areas. These common sense solutions allow us to respect the privacy and safety of all students while upholding the standards the majority in our community value. In conclusion, keeping boys in boys' bathrooms and girls in girls' bathrooms and maintaining separate locker rooms is a matter of protecting privacy, ensuring safety, and respecting the diverse needs of our entire student body. The majority of this board will continue to foster a supportive and secure environment for all of our students. Thank you.
Just really brief. A few minutes ago, actually a couple hours ago now, one of the patron comments mentioned concerns about a website that teachers were directing students to look to that should be blacklisted. I'm sure we have new informational staff and admin, and so it seemed like something worth looking into. I imagine the leadership here just is already aware and will look into some of those comments, so I appreciate what was shared. I was also going to celebrate Titus Sissel and just being part of the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is officially St. Louis Cardinals country, but now it's Cardinal country and Diamondback country, and it's okay to celebrate that. It's okay for this reason only to wear an Arizona Diamondbacks hat within Francis Howell. I want to make two last things. One, Director Ponder's not here for work purposes, and just want to share that his absence was not due to anything outside of work-related restrictions. Just want to make sure we're saying truthful things on behalf of one another, and want to share that piece on his behalf. I'm looking forward to all the pictures of the new playgrounds being brought in. I think those pictures will probably start coming in next month, so we get a chance to celebrate a lot of the things that your Prop S funds are being used for, and a lot of celebrations coming in. I do have an interest in a future conversation about vaping at some point or another, but whenever that happens, just how do we make sure everything goes well for our students? The last thing I want to make a comment on, and I hesitate, but I feel like it's last Saturday there was an event, and former President Trump was hit by a bullet, and I just want to share that my prayers are with him for his safety, and my prayers are with the people who lost their life on that day. And I feel like the way that we treat each other within this environment can go a long way into creating a better environment for all people. And I just wanted to say, again, I'm thankful that former President Trump is alive and well, and also give my prayers of condolences for those who were also hurt on that day. So I want to share that too.
Just real quick, I want to back up with what Ms. Pushkar said about the policy committee meeting, working with the FHEA. It was very engaging, and the comments back and forth. And I like the discussions that we have regarding these policies. These policies are not a right versus a left or bad guys versus good guys. It's opening dialogue between us all. And the engagement within the community, it should be encouraged. So any input that you guys want to give to us, please do so. But emails or conversations of don't do it. Oh, okay, well, we can be a little more constructive than that. And then the other thing would be is the diversity of ideas that we heard with FHEA and hearing it from a viewpoint. Diversity of ideas is a good thing. I don't know why there should be hissing. We talked about this when Janet Stiglitz, during her closing comments, when she said, can we not all work together as a community? Everybody thought, wow, yeah. Why not with diversity of comments? If you don't agree with somebody, practice good common decency and keep it to yourself and discuss it with them in a private manner. But what good does it do to boo and hiss somebody in a public event? I don't get it. And then I'll finish with this. Just so you know, too, policy 6450, the assignment of grades. I asked that it be pulled for a second read. Dr. Buckman, we talked since the last meeting. There's going to be a committee put together to find out how we can fine tune that policy to maybe have it work across grades, have it work across subjects. And I'll be happy to, I'm excited to be working along with that committee, so. God bless.
All right, just a reminder, we have our next meeting on August 15th. That's the next regular board meeting. I do believe there will be a board retreat coming up sometime in the near future, a date to be announced, so those of you who are interested in watching that exciting meeting are welcome to watch the board docs for announcement of that. Otherwise, I'd like to wish everyone a good night, and board, I'll hear a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And Director Owens. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Have a good night.